Okay, folks, let's chat for a little bit. All right, who can hear me? Everybody there? By the way, I think super chats are actually available now. So if anybody wants to drop some money my way, you are more than welcome to. But honestly, I don't expect it. Oh gosh, yeah. Super chats are kind of like for people. Sorry about the freaking lighting again. I know this is not the best time of day for it, but it's the time of day I had to do it. Yeah, super chats are kind of like they're ways to get your name out in front of everybody, because occasionally I've seen that people who do kind of a mix of super chats and regular comments will put people's comments out there and kind of willy-nilly. They'll pick and choose which ones they do. Now the super chats they kind of feel obligated to do because people paid money for that. So one of these days maybe. But in any case, I am going to take a look and see if anybody else has posted under the last Rippaverse Goalposts that features me. And the reason I want to do that is because I saw some comments on there that I wanted to respond to, but I can't respond on Twitter. And so I figure I may as well respond on YouTube. So let me go and find Rippaverse Goalposts and then find that last tweet specifically. And I was kind of disappointed in this last Rippaverse Goalposts tweet because from the caption, Mike is upset with some of you guys. I mean, I already kind of knew it was going to be a bad edit. And sure enough, when I saw where he started the edit from, I knew that he was going to clip out some very important parts because there just wasn't enough time. Hey, Puma Fist, what's up? Welcome aboard. This is your first live stream, right? As far as with me, I haven't heard from you in a while. We were supposed to do a live stream together at one point, but I already went and did that video on how much I predicted for Eric July's second ISOM campaign. I predict 3.2 million. That's my number. That's what I'm going with. So I don't know what your prediction is for that. Let's see. Okay, what are we saying here? And for some reason, I'm getting an ad for Cheech and Chong's gummies. No, I don't need that. Okay, so Crystal Chloe said, I still stick with what I said last time. Sure, there's nothing on the cover that attaches the name to the guy on the cover. Now, we're talking about the cover to ISOM number 2 here, and that is the subject of Rippaverse Goalposts clip, in which I basically say that the people who are saying that it's asking for too much to ask that the name of the character, which in this case is Chodron, be linked to the fact that Chodron actually is on the cover of ISOM number 2 is somehow asking for too much. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Hello, Rippaverse Goalpost. That's right. You, you are part of the target for this. I was a little disappointed in your editing, because you left out my entire argument about why I was calling some of the Rippaverse fans dipshits. And I'm like, I don't know if he's trying to make this work for me or work against me, because on one hand, if somebody sees the jump cut, then they might say, oh, well, I want to see what it is exactly he's saying in the jump cut, and maybe they'll go to my video and watch it, although I can't remember. It doesn't look like, I don't know, did you provide the link to the video? I need to, let's see, break that out as a separate window. I don't think you provided the link to the video. Well, you did show the title of it, so anybody who wants to go see it is going to be able to see it. So I'm thinking, I don't know if that was your plan. If your plan was, when they see Mike saying this, and especially if they know that Mike's been, at least kind of sort of stable in the future, in the past, then maybe they'll want to go and see exactly what it is he has to say behind the jump cut. But god dang, I'm like, okay, so he just had me called the Rippaverse Van dipshits twice without a reason. I'm like, oh, that's not gonna go over well. So let me go over to so yeah, let's talk about the subject matter. Yeah, I know it limits it to 2 minutes and 20 seconds, but you had already posted my argument in like your previous clip of one of my videos. So I'm thinking that, I just didn't know if you thought all of that information was relevant. I mean, I thought you might have cut out some of the original information since you'd already played it before, and at least let my argument itself flow. So, oh well. So anyway, the point is that on the cover of ISOM number 2, cover A, you've got a picture of, and I should have printed out a picture, but it'd be black and white because that's the only kind of printer I have. I got a cheap brother printer that's a laser printer. But I don't have a color printer because I never need one. Anyway, it's got ISOM fighting this big gray skull-faced looking dude on the cover, and down at the bottom is a box that says presenting for the first time, or presenting the first time appearances of, and then it names off 3 characters. You've got Sydney Bloodruth, you've got Gooding, and you've got Chadron. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, so those are 3 characters, and since none of their names are tied to the character that's on the cover, then I guess that's a 4th character. That's some 4th unnamed character that maybe ISOM fought in the past. I mean, could be. But later I find out from sources off the field, from sources like, Eric July, from sources like Twitter when they're doing drawings and rough sketches, that Chadron, whose name is mentioned in that box, is actually the characters on the cover. But there's nothing on the cover linking him to his name. And so I'm like, it's right there. You may as well do something like presenting the first appearances of Sydney Bloodruth, Gooding, and then break off into a separate box, the Fury of Chadron, and that way you would know that Chadron is the big guy on the cover. And what's funny is that a lot of people were accusing me of, for one thing, wanting to know everything up front. And that's like, no, I mean, if I'm asking for your name, I'm not asking for your driver's license number. I'm not asking for your kid's date of birth. I mean, I'm not asking for the world just because this one piece of information that would have been so easy to reveal is not on the cover. And moreover, it's something that is already being distributed through other means. Now, here's the thing that kind of clued me in and gave me the idea for this live stream, was that what are they doing if what are they doing other than hand-holding if they're giving you this information outside of the book? It's like, okay, you just named Chadron on the cover, you're showing Chadron on the cover, but you're not telling us that this guy on the cover is Chadron, but you're telling us outside of the book. Well, hold on a second. I thought you weren't going to hold our hands. Yeah, how is that not holding our hands? If you're going to give us this information outside of the book, instead of just letting us find out for ourselves whenever we get the book. I mean, there's some hand-holding going on here. and what's ironic as hell is that if you look at what was being offered in the last ISOM number 1 campaign, there were people who were actually paying for hand-holding. One of the things that they're paying for is the Documon cards. What are the Documon cards if not the ultimate in hand-holding? You may be curious about who these 2 characters in Darren's bar are in ISOM number 1. Well, hey, do you just want to know everything up front? I mean, hey, do you want us to hold your hand and have to tell you who these characters are? They're like, well, apparently so, because some people paid $100 for the privilege. They paid $100 for a set of cards that would tell them information that is not in the book. I mean, what is that if not the ultimate desire to have your hand held? To know more about these characters in a way that you had to pay for the privilege for. I mean, I'm just surprised because one of the things that I've said in my videos is like that character Lillian, whoever she is, and the reason I say whoever she is because I don't want my hand held. I don't want to have to go and look up somebody else's tweet. I don't want to have to go up and look up a Documon card reprint somewhere where somebody scanned it and loaded it up to the internet. I don't want to know something that doesn't come straight out of the book. I still don't know that Florispark is actually in Texas, except for the fact that, Eric July has actually said that, but what is that if not hand-holding too? You're telling us this is happening in Texas. Why don't you tell us that in the book? If you're not going to tell it to us in the book, then if you have to feel like you have to tell it to us outside of the book, you're leading people by the hand. What exactly is it that you think you're doing otherwise? You're basically admitting that either that or you're admitting that you didn't communicate well enough in the book. And there's a couple times where Eric July has done exactly that. He said, I should have named Michael and Lillian when they were appeared in the book. And although he says, I'm not saying I would have gone back and done it. It's like, no, if you're saying you should have done it, you're saying you should have gone back and done it. That just logically follows, or else you don't really mean what you said the first time. So, yeah, I'm just like, are you serious? I mean, all of these people who paid $100 a pop so that they could learn things about these characters that don't appear in the book. I am shocked, and then these are probably the same people that are going to turn right around and say, oh, well, you just want your handheld. I'm like, no, I certainly don't want my handheld to the tune of the $100 that you paid to have your handheld. Oh my goodness. What's up? Oh, okay. I thought for a moment I thought Puma Fist was saying that he wasn't going to beat 1.3 million, but he was actually saying something about ISOM #1 and then period and then 3 million. Yeah, I'm still saying 3.2, but no, yeah, Sonic Man just made the same mistake I did. No, look at what he's saying again. He's saying 3 million tops. But yeah, I'm like, what the heck? So let me go back over the, let's see, about to start. Oh, thank you. I just got a comment from Verbena 208 saying, hey, Mike, about to start the first page of the story you scripted for me. Yes, let me just go ahead and make that announcement then, is that Verbena 208 is a comic book artist, and he sent me an idea for a comic book script, and I basically scripted out an 8-page story. So that is now in production, and I believe it's going to be part of a sci-fi anthology book. And that's going to have about, well, I don't know exactly how many stories you're planning on, but at some point I will be, making announcements and doing some promos for that book, which is going to include a story that was scripted by me. So yeah, I enjoyed making that story and scripting that from Verbena 208's idea. And so when that's out, then I will let everyone know. And hopefully we can, I assume it's going to be done through some sort of crowdfunding, either Indiegogo or Fund My Comic kind of thing. I don't know all the business plans for it, but I am looking forward to seeing that in print and getting some copies out to people who are going to want to have that in their hands. And so, at this point, maybe I'll get taken a little more seriously now that I will be an official independent comic book writer myself, or scripter anyway. I also have somebody who is a penciler who was looking for a 12-page story, and I converted one of my short story ideas that I had into a 12-page comic book story and sent that off. Now, I don't know if that's going anywhere or not. If it does, then, hopefully that'll be something that gets offered later, either this year or next as well. So let's see, what is Verbena 208? I think Eric is introducing too many characters, in my opinion, instead of telling good stories about the characters they already have. Well, ISOM has always been designed to be the launching pad for the Rippaverse. So I'm not surprised that ISOM #2 is going to follow in that vein, because if you had Alpha Core with their 3 characters, then you had Yaira, and they both make their appearances, but then they just, fly on off into their own separate books. So I assume that that's pretty much going to be the same kind of thing going on here. You're going to have Sydney Bloodruth make her appearance, Gooding make an appearance. Chaudron is probably more integral to the story. It looks like fighting Chaudron is what caused ISOM to quit for some reason. And then you'll see the characters spin on off. And there will be books spinning off from those books as well. Apparently, Chuck Dixon and his book on Alpha Core gave him an idea to do a new street level book for the Rippaverse, and so that may actually wind up coming out before ISOM number 3. Even I'm wondering about that. I wonder how many campaigns they're going to be able to successfully launch at the same time, because I know they're kind of trying to do them in some rapid succession this year, but it'll be interesting to see if Chuck Dixon's book comes out this year or like beginning of next, and then ISOM number 3 after that, and then hopefully Norfolk number 1 after that. Although it does look like Eric July says he's reserving the right to do Norfolk number 1 for himself, which means he has to get done with ISOM number 3 first, and then move forward with Norfolk. And I hope he does, because I'm kind of tired of waiting for Norfolk, knowing that it's going to be like another year before we get Norfolk. That's a little aggravating. So yeah, I mean, whatever the timetable works out to be, that's what it's going to be. But and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are going to be waiting around for that, and I will be too. So yeah, it's not like the delay matters. I mean, look how long we waited for CYBERFROG 2. We're patient motherfuckers. That's one thing we are. Let's see. Biff Bam Boom Comics, hail to you too. Let's see. Anybody else give a Garfield's Bizarre Adventure does not like my criticism of the hand holding that I perceive Rippaverse fans to be getting. Let's see what one person said here. This is Crystal Chloe, and says, I still stick with what I said last time. Sure, there's nothing on the cover that attaches the name to the guy on the cover, so at least she agrees with my basic premise. But I don't see why that attachment needs to be made. Well, the question is, if it doesn't need to be made, but at the same time, it is a little misleading that when you've got a person on the cover who's right there altogether, just right in front of you, that why wouldn't you attach that name to the character? Do you really want it to be a mystery? And it's obvious that Eric July and fans don't, because they're already telling everybody about it among themselves all through the internet. So I learned on Twitter that Chadron is the guy on the cover. So why wasn't that made clear to us on the cover that was Chadron? It's one thing if there's a piece of information that is intentionally hidden. And this is something that I covered in my video on hand-holding versus good communication. It's one thing if you are wanting to hold this back from the reader, then that's fine. But it's clear that Chadron's identity and the fact that he's the person on ISOM ISOM number 2 cover A, that's not a piece of information that anybody is holding back outside of the cover, and yet it's held back on the cover. So why would you do that? I mean, if you want people to know, then communicate it through the book. And that's one of my pet peeves about a lot of the mistakes that I see in Rippa, not just Rippaverse comics, but other comics as well. And it'll be interesting to see if this is a mistake that pops up in more professionally, not more professionally written comics, but rather written by the professionals, how well they do with, say, dropping their characters' names. Because I've seen artists like Rini Strachowski, who recently was featured on Eric July's live stream. In her book Fiendish #1, there's a major supporting character whose name is not dropped for the first 8 pages of the book, even though he's an integral part of those 8 pages. It's like, why are you holding back? I mean, unless nobody's name has been mentioned such that to mention this character's name is going to be a shocker or surprise reveal or something, at least as far as I know. I mean, I have not yet read Fiendish, so I don't know if that character's name is going to mean something later on, such that when we find out who that character is, we're like, oh my gosh, you mean that was that character all along? I mean, I have no idea. But in the case of that character, I'm just like, why am I still having to think of this as the kid who pals around with Calamir or whoever her main character is? Same thing in Chuck Dixon's Ghosts of MATECUMBE Key. He's actually got a character who is a drug dealer who works for the larger drug dealer, and he is featured so prominently. There's actually a panel break featuring him, and his name is never mentioned, even though his henchman Benny is mentioned. So why isn't this guy's name dropped? that's another thing where I see that kind of as a mistake. And it's all a matter of realizing that the readers need these little hooks in order to get interested in your characters and to be able to talk about them intelligently. So when you have major characters like the police captain at the beginning of ISOM #1, or you have major characters like Michael Copper or this Lillian girl, you need to drop their names. And there are times when Eric's admitted that, and there are times when he has not. Let's see. Tahilum29 says Ethan Van Sciver has shown way too much favoritism to CYBERFROG and zero love to Rainbow Brute. Well, people have been waiting so long for CYBERFROG 2, and now he may as well strike while the iron is hot with CYBERFROG 3. Rainbow the Brute is something that we know is coming. We know it's coming in multiple ventures because he's also got his Rainbow Brute, something about Two Tall Tales or something like that. I don't remember the name of that book, but it's an anthology of stories that have been drawn by other people. And, people are looking forward to it. And I don't think he's actually had the campaign for it yet. So he's got time. He's got time to work on it. But CYBERFROG 3 is really his most pressing project. And I know he wants to get through with that. He wants to get through with Red Extermination. He wants to get through with the 4th issue, the Green Supremacy. At that point, he'll probably have more time to focus on other properties besides CYBERFROG, since Green Supremacy is going to be the end of that first CYBERFROG arc, starting with Bloodhoney. So yeah, I mean, I would expect it within the next 1 or 2 years. Let's see here. Anybody else here? Puma Fist is a huge hater, says Rippaverse Goalposts. I've noticed that. There's nothing like the back patio of Puma Fist's rage. Oh my God. And I don't understand. I honestly, from Puma Fist, I don't understand the reason for all the hate, because it almost sounds like this was that the Rippaverse was something that you were looking forward to, and then for some reason you felt betrayed by the way that Eric July released it as a pre-order campaign or something. I have yet to understand why all the hate towards the ISOM #1 and ISOM #2, especially since ISOM #2 is still sight unseen. If it turns out to be a bad book, I can hate on it then. But if it turns out to be a good book, well, I'm going to be pleasantly surprised. And I'm going to say, hey, look, Eric July is actually improving here. Maybe we can have even more to look forward to with ISOM #3 and with the other 2 books coming out from Chuck Dixon and the Soska sisters. So, yeah, let's see. Chuck Dixon hasn't written, how Puma Fest says, Chuck Dixon hasn't written anything good in 20 years. Wow, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I did do a preview of Joe Frankenstein, which had an 8-page preview, and there was not really anything in there that impressed me too much. In fact, I had a lot of criticism for the first 8 pages, and when I saw Joe Frankenstein Volume 2 offered, I took a look at those 8 pages as well, but I didn't really see enough in there to want to take up a preview video of that. It wasn't bad, but at the same time, it's like, well, you have to be reading the first portion of it to even understand what's going on in the second portion. So I don't think I'm going to bother at that point. So let's see. Honestly, Garfield Bizarre Adventure says, honestly, Mike, I think you are actually a classic critic, like Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, but for comics. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you disagree, and yeah, I mean, seriously, that's all I'm doing really, is just trying to point out the good and the bad. Of course, I have a tendency to point out the bad more often than I point out the good, because I figure, okay, well, the only thing I need to do to avoid screwing up the good is just not mention anything about it at all, and then he's not going to change it. The only thing that I want to see changed is the bad, and so that leads me into a tendency to say more bad things than good, just because it's the bad things that really need to be addressed. But I do try to add some positive critique where I can. I wish I had taken like a moment out of his Monetize Your Haters session that I was featured on and been able to say, hey, these are the things I actually liked about the book. And that way, maybe establish more of a rapport at that point. But after all of my complaints, it probably would have rung hollow anyway. PumaFest says Eric July lied about ISOM. He said he was going to have a finished book and it was just another crowdfunder. I think he had all of the artwork and such done, with the exception maybe of some coloring and lettering, which is not really that difficult to get done on a timely schedule. So, from what I understand, he actually had all of the stuff paid for and all of the actual work done. So, I think maybe even the coloring and the lettering was all done and it just needed to be printed. So, all right, see you, Pumafist. Yeah, I don't know. I, I I think that because he's calling it a pre-order campaign, that he had all of the work done initially, and so all of the only thing that needed to happen was that the books needed to be printed. So beyond that, I think he was done. So that's what I remember. I didn't think that it was. I didn't think that and certainly wasn't a delayed book. It wasn't one where you paid up front and then you had to wait like 2 years for it. You got it within a couple of months, and the same thing's happening with this campaign. In fact, we're actually going to get it sooner. The campaign just started at what, end of June or something, and now we're going to get the comics at end of July. That's pretty darn timely as far as the turnaround goes. And the real delay in starting the campaign had to do with his warehouse issues, where the city was dragging its feet on approving the warehouse. So yeah, I can't fault him for that. That was a city issue. So I don't mind. I mean, I'm actually keeping a close eye on my retailer to make sure that as soon as ISOM number 2, cover A and cover B drop over there, and I'm hoping that it's cover A and cover B, because I'd like to get a copy of cover A especially, and I'd like to get a copy of cover B just to shove the ripping in Ethan Van Sciver's face. Shouldn't have called me wrong, Ethan. Shouldn't have called me wrong. Yeah, I'd like to get those 2 covers through my retailer. Otherwise, I'll wind up getting a couple of copies of ISOM cover D, I guess, which is going to be a bummer because those are not the covers I want. Or I might just go, I don't know, plunk down and go ahead and buy it. I've got store credit at the retailer, is why I want to buy it through the retailer. So I've got sufficient funds over there. In fact, I just turned in like another $80 worth of shipment to them because I had the DC Villains Omnibus hardcover. Does anybody remember that from, let's see, it was the Forever Evil crossover in DC Comics. Basically, you had the Earth taken over by villains, and you had the regular comics on the DC side all replaced with one-shots of the DC villains. So you had like 4 Batmans that had spotlights on the Joker, on Mr. Freeze, on who else? Scarecrow, on Riddler, and then you had Black Adam featured, you had Lex Luthor featured, you had Bizarro and Metallo and Clayface, and you had all of these different villains that were all across the DC universe featured in a 52 issue omnibus that they finally collected everything into. And I went and I picked up my own separate copies of the comics that I actually wanted. I think I might be missing one, but I'll miss it. I don't really need much more than what I've got. But I did see, or I did finally realize that, that the whole New 52 thing, especially now that it's kind of over, I don't need to really keep any of the stuff that I had from that. I had a Zero omnibus from there, and I had the Zero omnibus. I read through the Zero issues. I really wasn't impressed with anything that I found in there. I had the Villains omnibus. Really wasn't impressed with that, so I decided to give up both of those. The only big volume item that I'm waiting to turn in for credit is I have a volume of Age of Ultron. And right before I was ready to sign it over to them, somebody else signed over their copy. And now I'm having to wait until somebody buys an Age of Ultron hardcover from mycomicshop.com before I can turn over my own volume to them and hopefully get some store credit for that. So, I'm hoping that they will get ISOM number 2, cover A and cover B, because those are the covers that I really do want to get. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know exactly. Yeah, I have a feeling if they don't have the covers A and cover B, then I'm just going to go ahead and buy it straight from the website. because there's just, if you're going to pay so much for a comic, you may as well pay for the version of the comic cover that you want. That's the thing, is I can't see spending, in any case, it's, whether it's credit or whether it's cash, it's the same thing eventually, because that's $35 a credit I could have spent on something else. But if you're going to spend that much on the comic, then you may as well spend on the version of the comic that you really want. And the version that I want is cover A. The version I want to destroy is cover B. Let's see. So my 47-minute PowerPoint presentation was detailed. Now, that was the presentation on the covers. Yes, okay. Rippaverse Goalposts is referring to my 47-minute presentation on the ISOM covers and how those covers, how I see, it's basically kind of like how I see covers as what they ought to be, which is still not what they used to be back in the day. I remember when I attended a panel at a Comic-Con. I want to say it was the New York Comic-Con, but I'm not sure. And Carmine Infantino was there. And Carmine Infantino drew one of the most famous covers in all of comic book history. It's the one with Barry Allen and Jay Garrick both racing to save the same guy. It's the cover for the Flash of Two Worlds issue. And he talked about how he and Julie Schwartz, who was the writer on the Flash, partnered together to write stories. And what he would do is he would draw a cover, and he would have something like that particular cover, or he would have a cover of Captain Boomerang shooting Barry Allen off into space with a boomerang, or he'd have Barry Allen being turned into glass by Abracadabra or something like that. And then Julie would take that cover and he would write a whole story around it. And so Carmine Infantino deliberately drew his covers to be cliffhangers to draw the reader in. And then it was Julie Schwartz's job to write the stories explaining, how do we get to that point and how does he get out of that snare? So that's what I would really like to see comic book covers take a return to. But, short of that, I would at least like them to show what's in the book to some degree. I remember even thinking about things like Ultimate Spider-Man #1. Now, of course, Ultimate Spider-Man #1, Peter Parker gets bitten by the radioactive spider, but he never gets into his costume by that point because he hasn't created a costume. And I'm thinking, well, what would I put on the cover if that's all I've got is him getting bitten by the spider? Well, I'd probably show him getting bitten by the spider, or at least have his hand on the cover and be like clutched like that when the spider sinks its fangs in. And at least then you're representing something that happens in the book. But I do say in the video that #1 issues, anniversary issues, those are exceptions. So you can actually, kind of let your mind go free, because you want to give kind of an iconic representation of the character itself on the cover of the #1 issue, so that people can look at that and say, oh, okay, so that's what this series is going to be about. Well, let me give that a try. Now, doing that again and again and again, like they did for ISOM or not ISOM, Iron Man or Spider-Girl back in the day when it was just poster covers all the time, like, yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. But yeah, if you wanted to see how I break down the covers of the 2 ISOM books, all 4 covers for each of them, do go check out my video on ISOM and the Secret of Great Covers. Okay, what do we got here? I do like that. Sahilum29 says, I do like the Shane Davis variant, but the price is way too expensive for me. Yeah, I was actually wondering if the cover D was just going to be the Shane Davis variant without foil, because I think that would have probably been, just as good and would have sold just as well. There were probably people out there who were saying, man, they were saying exactly what you're saying, that, Shane Davis's cover is awesome, but, I really would like, is there a non-foil version that I could buy? Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says, hey, Mike, any plans to go to San Diego Comic-Con? Nope, I have never been to San Diego Comic-Con. It has always seemed like a horror story just to get tickets. Now, of course, this year is different, and Eric July himself is going to be there. But I've already met Eric once at a meetup in North Texas. And, yeah, it's not like until ISOM #2 comes out that I'm actually going to have anything to say. So when that's probably happening at end of this month, or is it? I don't even remember when the San Diego Comic-Con takes place, but I figure I'll be just knee deep in my own ISOM videos by then, so there's no sense in me going up there. There's nothing else for me to see anyway. I'm just really not into the comic book world as much anymore, except through, of course, I always read the previews. I'm always reading the previews, and I'm always kind of skimming to see, what's still going on in the comics. I read Bleeding Cool News to kind of keep current on things. Did anybody see that Fallen Friend issue? My God, what a waste! I mean, just a wasteful death and a wasteful issue celebrating the wasteful death. And I remember there was some article or something talking about how Wolverine makes an appearance in a mosque, and like, okay, yeah, was Wolverine ever like a big friend of Ms. Marvel? I don't know that much about her lore, so I don't know. I just didn't see very much of. You kind of got a little bit of idea of the character, but not enough to really get you interested. And it certainly wasn't anything like a jumping off point for comics. I can't imagine somebody taking Fallen Friend and saying, "Ooh, I could spin this story off into." No, I mean, it's all just kind of epilogue type stories that don't really lead anywhere, and it doesn't even lead into anything like threatening a return of Ms. Marvel, which we're all kind of anticipating since she's got that movie called The Marvels coming up, which is going to feature, Captain Marvel and Ms. Marvel. And I don't know if it's going to be what, Photon? Is it going to be is Monica Rambeau going to be Photon, or is she going to be Lieutenant Marvel? which I think might already be trademarked by DC. I seem to remember there was a Lieutenant Marvel back in the day. Yeah, Garfield's Bizarre Adventure says Ms. Marvel will eventually come back. Death is meaningless in comics. It really has gotten to that point where anytime a character dies, you just don't care. I mean, even back in the day when Valiant did it, and they tried to establish that in Valiant, dead means dead. Yeah, but that just means that you're not going to kill off very important characters. Now, it was surprising in the first few issues of Harbinger, where you had like a team of 4 or 5 kids there, and you actually killed off one of the kids. But even then, it was just kind of like it was almost anticlimactic. It was a death for a death's sake. I wasn't really sure how that. I mean, it did up the stakes and it did lead to some interesting storylines a little bit going forward. But really, that character's arc was just, I don't know. Valiant didn't do any better by their characters in the next round. In fact, they had a whole issue of Hardcore, or maybe it was Harbinger Renegades, issue 5, where it was like a complete massacre of this whole team of kid superheroes. And it was like, okay, well, that felt a little gratuitous, but I hope you got your point across, whatever you think the story was. Yeah, death in comic books. I mean, you saw, I think the Green Arrow had some sort of death scene in the latest not Infinite Frontier. It was what was it? Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. Is that what this latest DC series was? And Green Arrow supposedly met his demise, but we all knew it wasn't a demise. So off he goes into I don't know, the multiverse or something. Yeah. What's really disturbing is when they make whole series around deaths, and then they make those deaths mean nothing. Like Heroes in Crisis. I did a couple of videos on Heroes in Crisis and how that series turned out to be a killer letdown. You were threatening all of these characters' deaths, and then the characters that got killed, with the exception of a couple of notable names, were all these throwaway characters that you may never have even heard of. In fact, I think some of them were invented, may have been invented just for that book. So at least I'd never seen them be outside of Heroes in Crisis. So who knows? But I was like, okay, you're taking these 2 characters and killing them? Why? I mean, number one, this guy, we know he can't possibly be dead because he just got brought back from being vanished for 10 years. That doesn't make any sense. And sure enough, it didn't make any sense. And there was no reason to think that character was going to die after all. So by the time everything got wrapped up, there were no real consequences to anything. I mean, that character now, the character who turned out to be the murderer in Heroes in Crisis, is now like an A-list tier hero. It's like, give me a break. It's not only does death not mean anything, murder doesn't mean anything. I don't know what comic books are supposed to mean anymore. And that's largely why I've abandoned comic books for the most part, and why I'm just reading and critiquing these particular comics that are, at least seem interesting in some way, shape, or form on the independent side. Because as far as the DC goes, as far as Marvel goes, I don't know where their heads are at. I don't know where DC and Marvel's heads are at concerning morality. I don't know where it is concerning, where their characters are supposed to go. When are we going to see the next reboot? Is it, it's been 5 minutes. Have we had another DC reboot yet? Secret Wars honestly was a perfect opportunity for Marvel to do a significant reboot, and they passed it up completely. I was like, how do you do that? I mean, we know that we've got all of this baggage with Marvel Comics, and I know they don't want to. Oh, they don't want to crap all over their legacy, but there's too much baggage built up in the Marvel universe. I can't read Iron Man without thinking, what the hell has this guy been through? Because they yo-yo these characters around now. You had Spider-Man for a while. Dr. Octopus was inhabiting his mind, but then Peter Parker came back and had to deal with all the fallout from the Dr. Octopus stuff, and then all of a sudden he's stripped of all his stuff that Dr. Octopus built for him, and now he's back to being a photographer at the Daily Bugle. It's like, if nothing's going to change or nothing's going to stay changed, why the hell am I even reading this stuff? None of these characters are growing. You've still got the same four people as the Fantastic Four, when back once upon a time, you actually had different people in the Fantastic Four, but then you had to roll it right back up to the original configuration. And it's like, if nothing's going to change, I don't care to be along for the ride for this. So, yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I think I'm going to. Cool seeing you live, Mike. Got to go. See you around Eric's chat later. Yeah, good to see you again, Garfield. I'm going to go ahead and close this down. Thank you for watching. I'm Mike Partika. Please do like and subscribe this live stream, or like and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the live stream. Yeah, if you want to just watch it every day, that's fine. And hopefully we will be seeing the drop of ISOM number 2 in the next couple of weeks. And I will be looking for that. And I will give you more announcements whenever Verbena 208 has made progress on the book that I am scripting, or that I have scripted for him. And I can't wait to see some of the first pages from that. All right, everybody, take care. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to y'all later.